watching him go. Why did he have to see that stupid drawing? She asked herself, and then thought about it, deciding to buy another notebook and put that one away. She walked through the gate with a sad look on her face, and as she passed the pool, she didn't notice a shadow lying on one of the sun loungers. Did you have fun at his house? A voice suddenly surprised her. Oh my God. Jaemin, you scared me, she exclaimed. When she looked at him, her legs trembled. He was wearing jeans that showed the hem of his boxer shorts and no shirt, showing off his tattooed chest that drove her crazy. She could see every division in his abdomen, and her mouth went dry. His gaze was serious, but he gave her a naughty smile when he saw her looking at him like that. He took the glass of whiskey he was holding to his pink lips, while his inquisitive gaze didn't leave her for a minute. How did you know I was at his house? She asked, trying to disguise her nervousness. I asked your aunt where you were because I was worried since you were taking so long. Then she told me something funny. He faked a smile and moved closer, stopping a few centimeters from her face, allowing her to smell the delicious scent of his perfume mixed with whiskey. She told me you'd be a while because you were at your boyfriend's house, he said dismissively and took a last sip of his drink, leaving only the sound of the ice dancing in his empty glass. Funny, isn't it? She said you had a boyfriend. I didn't know that, he continued. The sarcastic smile on his face faded, and he pulled her to him, making their bodies collide, his whole body shivering as he felt the glass of ice on his back. So I want to hear from you, Jane. Is it true? Is he your boyfriend? He asked. Her heart was racing, her legs were shaking, and she just wanted to jump into his lap and devour his tempting pink lips. He caressed her face, bringing his hand to her jaw, stroking her lips with his thumb, and asked again, while his hungry eyes stared into hers. Tell me. His seductive voice drove her crazy, and she shook her head in the negative, unable to open her mouth, fearing to end up begging him to kiss her. He brushed his thumb across her lips, and she closed her eyes. He knew the power he had over her, and she couldn't resist any longer. Good girl, he whispered in her ear. He left a kiss on her neck that sent intense shivers down her spine, heightening all her senses. He was teasing her, pushing her to the limit, and she needed to provoke him somehow, so she surprised him by slightly biting his thumb. Don't tease me, he warned. He seemed to lose control and looked at her with a primitive, hungry desire, bringing his lips to hers urgently. They were devouring each other without worrying about the consequences, or who might be watching the show they were putting on. Jaemin, she breathed out his name, her voice a mixture of longing and anticipation. You're driving me crazy, girl, Jaemin confessed, his voice husky with desire. She was totally surrendered. She wanted more than anything to give him everything she had, but they heard the sound of the door opening and separated. Jane? Are you home already, my child? Her aunt's voice interrupted their passionate moment. Yes, Auntie. I'm going to bed because I'm very tired. Good night, Mr. Park, Jane hastily replied, trying to compose herself. She ran to her room and took a cold shower. She ended up thinking about what she was going to do all weekend. She would have the whole house to herself, as everyone was going away in the morning and wouldn't be back for 2 days. She could try calling Unji, but she didn't want to impose her presence. She woke up in the morning to her aunt knocking on the door, saying that she was going on a trip with Mi Soon. Jane said goodbye and left the room, checking that the house was empty. She put on some loud music while she made breakfast, ate, and then decided to take a dip in the pool. She put on a red bikini and spent half the day sunbathing, preparing her lunch, and eating while enjoying the view of the city. Her day had been relaxing, and she planned to end it by watching some movies. Jane went up to her room to get dressed and go to the movie theater, but she stubbed her toe on the furniture and groaned loudly in pain. Soon she heard a hard knock on the door. Jane, open that door now! Jaemin's voice boomed from the other side of the door. She was startled and got out of bed with difficulty, feeling her legs wobble from the pain. She used a silk robe to cover her body while he banged on the door harder and harder. In a minute, she called out, her heart pounding in her chest. When she thought she looked presentable, she opened the door and Jaemin was standing with his back to her, his head against the wall. Jaemin, what are you doing here? She asked, her voice tinged with surprise. He turned around quickly, and the look on his face was pure hatred. She had never seen such a fierce expression on his face. "You waited for me to turn my back so you could bring someone else to my house?" Jae-min accused, his voice laced with anger. "What?" she exclaimed, taken aback by his accusation. His accusing gaze seemed to want to devour her. She had never seen him so angry, and she couldn't understand why he was like that. "Who's there with you?" "Is that Eunji?" Taemin demanded, his voice sharp with suspicion. "What are you talking about?" Jane replied, her confusion evident. He made his way to her room, looked in every corner, even under the bed, and then returned his gaze to Jane, looking confused. "Were you alone?" he questioned, his tone softer now, mixed with uncertainty. She was dying of embarrassment, and by now, was hiding her face with her hands. "I thought you were with someone," Jae-min admitted, his voice quieter now, tinged with regret. When she finally managed to face him, all the anger that had been there minutes ago had dissipated. "Is that how you see me? Is that what you think of me? That I was going to wait for you to turn your back and bring a man here?" Jane retorted, her voice trembling with pain. Although she was embarrassed, his reaction disappointed her. "No, I'm sorry," Jae-min apologized, his voice filled with remorse. "What right do you have to come here accusing me and demanding explanations?" Jane demanded, her voice rising with indignation. He stared at her, looking surprised at the harshness in her words. "None. It's just that Misun has done so much," Jae-min explained, his voice tinged with frustration. "I'm not Misun," Jane exclaimed, her voice breaking with emotion. Jane was surprised by her own tone of voice. She didn't want to be compared to Misun. She had no scruples, and even fewer feelings. She wasn't like that woman in any way, and the fact that he distrusted her for the things someone else had done hurt her. "Please don't compare me to her," Jane pleaded, her voice tinged with hurt. "I'm sorry," Jae-min apologized, his voice softening. He lowered his gaze, and when he looked at her again with his beautiful brown eyes, she melted. "I would never do the things Misun does. I would never do anything to hurt you, and I would do anything to make you happy," Jae-min confessed. "While she doesn't appreciate what she has, I do," Jane affirmed. Jae-min came towards her, and Jane took a step back, leaning against the wall, feeling the warmth of his body gradually coming closer to hers. Their eyes were connected. Their bodies were like magnets attracting each other. "You do?" Jae-min inquired, his voice filled with longing. He ran his thumb over her lips, caressing them, and seemed hypnotized as he waited for her answer, his panting breaths showing how thirsty they were for each other, their gazes never leaving his lips for a second. "Yes, Jae-min, I appreciate you," Jane confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. Just as she was about to finish speaking, he silenced her by pressing his lips to hers. She clung to his neck, and their tongues fought for space until his cell phone started ringing. "What a great time to call me," Jae-min exclaimed, frustration evident in his voice. The phone stopped ringing, but in less than 2 seconds, the shrill ringing invaded the room again. "I'm sorry, this is a very important call. I have to answer it," Jae-min declared, his tone resolute. He stood up, answering the call, while Jane stared at him. "Detective Vargas, what have you found?" Jae-min questioned, his tone serious. He sat down on the bed, and his face paled, the anger of seconds ago dissipating, as he saw the sadness take over his face. "But can you tell me what you found?" "I see. And when will you finish your investigation?" "I see. All I can do is wait." Jae-min spoke into the phone, his voice tinged with disappointment. He hung up the phone and ran his hands through his hair. He was visibly frustrated, and she hated to see him so nervous. She moved closer to him, stroking his hair, and he wrapped his arms around her hips, resting his head on her lap. "What happened?" Jane inquired softly, her voice filled with concern. "That was the detective I hired to follow Misun. He said he already had an answer for me, but that we needed to meet. Now I'll have to wait, but from the tone of his voice I can tell he found something," Jae-min explained, his voice heavy with worry. "I'm sorry you're going through this," Jane whispered, her heart aching for him. He lifted his face to face her and pulled her to sit on his lap, I'm sorry for answering the phone, but I really don't want to do this to you when you're married. You deserve more than I can give you at the moment, Haemin confessed, his almond-shaped eyes conveying tenderness. Although she felt disappointed, Jane couldn't bring herself to feel angry. The truth was that he was going through a very confusing time, and she was the one in the wrong for wanting to be with him anyway. She knew the risks of getting involved with Yaemin. She knew he loved Misun. She knew she was just a silly, inexperienced girl around him, but knowing all this didn't change the fact that she had never wanted anyone that much. Arms. Do you want to go somewhere with me? He asks, his voice soft. She smiles with her eyes still closed and replies, With you? Always. So get changed. A friend of mine has set up a burger shop and it's opening today. I need to stop by to support him, and we'll grab something to eat, he explains. I'd love to, she replied eagerly. She gets up from his lap, and before leaving the room to get ready, he looks back and gives her a naughty smile. Jane, he calls out. I like your tan, he complimented with a playful tone. He bites his lips and walks away, leaving her on wobbly legs. She could hardly believe they'd kissed. She takes a shower, brushes her hair, and puts on jeans that flatter her curves with a black V-neck blouse, wearing sneakers of the same color. As it's a burger joint, there's no need for any overproduction. When she arrives in the room looking for him, he's already waiting for her wearing jeans with white sneakers and a red sweatshirt. As always, he looks handsome, and she loses her breath admiring him. Shall we go? He asks, offering his hand. She nods, and they walk off towards the car. He opens the door for her, and she gets in. He goes around the car, and when he gets in, he starts it, driving to the burger joint. He watches her as she drives with one hand, the other resting on her thigh. When they arrive at the place, they notice that, although it's small, it's very cozy, and the smell of the fries awakens their appetite. He approaches a man a little taller than him, wearing a backward cap and with a friendly smile that lights up when he sees Jaemin. Man, I thought you weren't coming, the man says with a grin. Did you think I'd missed the opening? Of course not, Lee. We've been friends for many years, and I'm very happy to see you achieving more and more. I couldn't help but come to see you, Haemin replies warmly. I'm glad, and I hope you like the burger, Lee says with a hopeful smile. I'm sure I'll like it, she chimes in, smiling at Lee. And who is this pretty girl? Lee asks, gesturing towards her. Haemin pulls her to him, putting his hands around her waist, and she shies away slightly. That's Jane, she's mine, he stuttered. Jaemin seems to be searching for words, and she jumps in, feeling the need to clarify.
Hey.
I work for him, she explains quickly. After all, what else could he say? Lover? Concubine? Lee smiles at her but seems confused by their proximity. Anyway, shall we sit down? Jaemin suggests, changing the subject smoothly. They leave and go to a table, sitting facing each other while he laughs. What? He asks, noticing her amusement. I found your desperation funny. What did you think I was going to say? She teases. Lover? Concubine? The other women? He jokes back, but his smile fades as he remembers something. That's not how I see you, he says, his tone serious. Then how do you see me? She asks, genuinely curious.
I see my future wife.
He bites his lip and gives her a naughty smile. As a friend, he replies, but there's a hint of something more in his eyes. Friends don't look at each other like that, she comments, her eyes searching his. I know. You're much more than a friend to me. You're my girl, but I really want to make you my wife, he confesses, his voice tinged with emotion. Her whole body responds to his words, and he takes her hand on the table, his touch sending shivers down her spine. Just wait until I've sorted out all this mess, he pleads, his eyes pleading for understanding. Before she can respond, a waitress approaches, interrupting their moment. Good evening. My name is Leah, and I'll be serving you tonight. What can I get you? She asks cheerfully. They look at the menu, and she decides to get a double burger, fries, and a strawberry milkshake. Jaemin laughs at her choice and orders the same. When the waitress leaves, he admires her with a silly smile. What? She asks, feeling self-conscious under his gaze. Will you be able to eat it all? He teases gently.
Yes.
If you let me, I'll eat mine and yours, she replied playfully. He laughs and takes her hand, kissing it tenderly. As they wait for their food, he looks around the crowded place, lost in thought. What's wrong? She asks, noticing his distant expression. Just regretting it, he replied cryptically. For what?
For what?
She presses gently. When Lee decided to open this burger joint, he asked me to join him as a partner, and I was very excited because it would be a new business, a new experience. But when I told Misoon about it, she scoffed and said that I shouldn't invest in something like that because it didn't suit me as an entrepreneur. She said it would be like a street stall and asked if I wanted to lower myself to that. I ended up not joining as a partner, and now, looking at the results, I regret it, Jaemin explains, his voice tinged with disappointment. Well, it's never too late. You can still invest here. I'm sure that the way it's full of people, this place will need to expand soon. And if the burger is as good as it smells, it could soon become a successful franchise, she suggests optimistically. He smiled at her, his eyes sparkling with hope. Do you think so? He asks, seeking reassurance. Of course. With a wonderful manager like you, I'm sure any business will be a success, she replied, smiling at him warmly.
Love.
He smiles shyly, and his face flushes slightly.
This story is
Thank you for always encouraging me, he says sincerely. Of course, Team Jaemin all the way, she jokes, trying to lighten the mood. He chuckles, and soon their order arrives. He savors the burger while she watches, feeling content just being in his presence. Wow, this is superb, she comments, genuinely impressed. I can see it, your face is smeared with sauce, he jokes, pointing out her messy appearance. What? She exclaims in surprise. He smiles and takes a napkin, wiping her face gently. That's better, he says, smiling fondly at her. She feels a warm flutter in her chest at his affectionate gesture, and she can't help but admire him even more. What's wrong? She asks, noticing his pensive expression. I love, he begins, but stops abruptly, his words hanging in the air. Her heart races in anticipation, waiting for him to continue. I love your way, he finally confesses, his voice filled with sincerity. You're so authentic, and you don't bother pretending to be what you're not. When I'm with you, I feel good, and I feel like I can be myself. Her heart swells with emotion at his words, and she reaches out to take his hand, squeezing it gently. And you can. I'll love any version of you, whether you're sad or happy, relaxed or angry, joking or quiet.
Side chick.
No matter how you are, I'll always want to be by your side, she assured him, her voice filled with unwavering devotion.
This story,
He smiles at her, his eyes reflecting the depth of his feelings, and they stare at each other like two teenagers in love. Loco approaches their table, interrupting their moment of intimacy. What's up? Are you okay? Loco asks, noticing their serious expressions. Jaemin turns his attention to him with a smile and nods as he takes another bite of his burger. Look, it's so approved that I'm seriously thinking of investing in the business, Jaemin announced proudly. Lee's eyes widen in surprise, and he grins from ear to ear. Really, man? Lee asked, unable to hide his excitement. Yeah, I had my doubts. But someone very convincing persuaded me, Jaemin says, nodding towards her, and Loco bows and thanks. Gee, thanks. I'm sure you won't regret it. I know you haven't done it before because of Misoon, and I'm glad to see you making a decision without her influence. That's progress, Lee comments, genuinely happy for his friend. It really is. I shouldn't have said anything to her. She doesn't even like hamburgers, Jaemin admits, his tone tinged with regret. She doesn't like anything, does she? She makes a disgusted face at everything, Lee adds, shaking his head in amusement. Jaemin's expression darkens momentarily, but he quickly shakes it off and continues eating. Look, this potato sauce has won my heart, she interjects, trying to lighten the mood. Jaemin smiles at her, grateful for her attempt to cheer him up. You liked it so much that your face was all smeared with gravy, he teases, pointing out her messy appearance. Let me enjoy my snack in peace, please, she jokes back, playfully sticking out her tongue at him. They laugh and continue eating, their conversation flowing easily as they reminisce about their school days, and share stories from their past. Their friendship is evident in their easy banter and genuine laughter, and she finds herself feeling grateful for the opportunity to be a part of it. When they finished eating, they start drinking soju and continue their conversation late into the night. The atmosphere is relaxed and comfortable, and she enjoys getting to know Haemin's friends better. Loco is friendly and outgoing, while Lee is more reserved but kind-hearted. Jaemin doesn't let go of her hand throughout the evening, always finding a way to include her in the conversation and make her feel welcome. Eventually, Jaemin decides it's time to leave because he's starting to feel drunk. She helps him into the house, supporting him as he stumbles slightly. He leans on her for support, his arm wrapped around her shoulders, and she can't help but feel a sense of closeness to him. As they reach his bedroom door, he turns to her with a sly smile. "I'm so drunk I don't think I'll find my room," he admits sheepishly. Her heart races at the implication of his words, and she feels a surge of desire coursing through her veins. "Will you sleep with me tonight?"
Don't even
he
try
asks, his voice low and husky. She nods eagerly, her pulse quickening with anticipation. But as they reach the door to his room, she freezes, remembering the day she saw him in bed with Misoon. All the hurt and betrayal she felt that day came rushing back, and she couldn't bring herself to enter his room. "What's wrong?" he asks, noticing her hesitation. "I'm sorry,